Begun. Kira sat in the dim glow of her laboratory, staring at the data on her screen. The numbers had not changed. The results were the same as before. Another failure. Her hands trembled as she placed them on the table. She had spent years searching for a cure, hoping to find a way to reverse the infertility crisis that was slowly destroying her species. But every experiment, every test, every calculation led to the same painful conclusion. There was no solution. The Xilari were once one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their technology surpassed most civilizations, and their knowledge of genetics was unmatched. But their progress had come at a cost. Over centuries, they had perfected their own DNA, eliminating weaknesses and diseases. They had become a species of perfect beings. And now, they were dying. Fewer and fewer children were born every cycle. The Xilari Senate had formed special research teams, funding scientists like Shkira to find a way to restore fertility. But years passed, and nothing worked. Shkira had once dreamed of having a child. She had imagined what it would be like to feel life growing inside her, to hold her offspring in her arms. But that dream had faded long ago. Now she only focused on her work, hoping that if she could not have a child, at least she could help others. A soft beep interrupted her thoughts. The screen flashed with an incoming message from the Xilari High Council. She straightened her back and tapped the screen. A holographic figure appeared, Counselor Drinak, one of the leaders of the scientific division. His face was stern, as always. "Shkira," he said, his voice calm but cold. "Your latest report confirms what we feared." She nodded. There has been no success. The genetic structure of our people has reached a point where it no longer responds to any known treatments. Drinak exhaled slowly. Then we must accept the inevitable. Shkira's throat tightened. "You mean giving up?" "There is no other option," he said. "We have tried everything. If no solution exists, then perhaps this is simply our fate." Fate. The word filled Shkira with quiet rage. She refused to believe that their extinction was fate. There had to be a way. But before she could protest, Drinak continued. "The Senate has decided to end the research programs." Shkira's heart pounded. "You can't be serious." "We are diverting our resources to other matters. There are more pressing concerns than chasing a lost cause." Shkira clenched her fists. She wanted to argue, to demand more time. But she could see it in Drenak's eyes. His decision was final. The transmission ended, leaving Shkira in silence. She turned back to her research, staring at the meaningless numbers. Was this truly the end? Would the Xilari vanish from the universe, not because of war or disease, but because they had made themselves too perfect to survive? She refused to accept it. For hours, she continued working, analyzing every possibility, searching for something she had missed. But exhaustion overtook her. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. When she awoke, the lab's artificial lights had dimmed, signaling the late hour. Her eyes were dry, her mind heavy with failure. She needed air. Leaving the lab, she walked through the grand halls of the Xilari Science Complex. The place felt emptier than before. Once, there had been hundreds of researchers working day and night to solve the crisis. Now, most had left, accepting their fate. She stepped outside onto a floating platform that overlooked the city of Xilari's Prime. Towering spires of silver and glass stretched toward the sky, shimmering under the glow of the twin moons. The city was still beautiful, still strong, but without children, without new life, it was a dying world. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden announcement from the central news system. A voice echoed across the city. "Attention, citizens. A new species has been officially recognized by the Galactic Council. The humans of Sol 3, known as Earth, have entered the interstellar community." Shkira barely reacted. Humans. She had heard of them before. A primitive species that had only recently. An advisor stepped in, his face pale. "Chancellor, we have a problem." Voral's eyes narrowed. What kind of problem? The advisor hesitated. There are rumors. Some of the scientists loyal to Shkira. They are planning something. Voral's expression darkened. Find them. Now. Back in the hidden chamber, Nathan's voice came through. All right, I'm in the system. You guys are seriously overconfident with your security. This is way too easy. Relic leaned over. Can you access the broadcast? Give me a second. Nathan muttered. Okay. Got it. We're live in 10 minutes. Shkira took a deep breath. 10 minutes. They had 10 minutes before the entire planet learned the truth. Talus glanced at the monitors. If the Senate finds us first. They won't, Shkira said firmly. But even as she said it, an alert flashed across the screens. Security BREAC DTTTT. They found us. Relic shouted. Nathan cursed. They're moving fast. You've got maybe 5 minutes before they shut this whole thing down. Shkira turned to the others. We have no choice. We go now. She stepped in front of the cameras, her heart steady. The screen blinked live. All across the planet, Scifi citizens paused as their screens flickered. Then, Shkira's face appeared. My people, she began, I speak to you today, not as a scientist, but as a Scifi who refuses to watch our species fade into history. In homes, in workplaces, across starships and colonies, millions of Scifi watched. The Senate has lied to you, she continued. They have told you that we are beyond saving, that our infertility is permanent, that our fate is sealed. She lifted the data tablet, showing the glowing proof. They are wrong. Gasps rippled through the viewers. Our kind can be saved, she said. We have discovered a cure, a way to bring life back to our people, but the Senate has chosen to destroy it. In the Senate hall, chaos erupted as leaders shouted in anger. Voral slammed his fist on the table. Shut it down. Technicians scrambled to cut the feed, but Nathan's voice whispered through the hidden channel. Too late. Shkira continued, her voice strong. We must not allow our future to be erased. We must stand together. Demand the truth. Demand our survival. The broadcast ended. For a moment, there was silence across the world. Then, a roar of voices. In the streets, Scifi citizens gathered, whispering, then shouting. Protests began. The people had heard the truth, and they would not be silent. In the hidden chamber, Relic exhaled. We did it. But Shkira was not smiling, because outside, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed. They're here, Talus whispered. The doors burst open. Armed guards flooded the room. A cold voice spoke. Shkira, you are under arrest. She lifted her chin. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. Kira stood tall as the guards surrounded her. Their weapons hummed with energy, ready to fire if she resisted. But she did not move. She had done what she set out to do. The truth was out. Now it was up to the people. Talus, Relic, and the others stood frozen, their faces pale with fear. The lead guard, a tall Scifi with dark silver eyes, stepped forward. His voice was cold. Shkira, you are under arrest for treason against the Senate. Shkira met his gaze. Treason? She let out a soft laugh. For trying to save my people. The guard's expression did not change. Come quietly, or we will use force. Before she could respond, her communicator crackled. Nathan's voice whispered in her ear. Don't panic. Help is coming. Shkira kept her expression neutral. She knew Nathan wouldn't say something like that unless he had a plan. She glanced at Relic and the others, giving them a small nod. Stay strong. Then she turned back to the guards and raised her hands. Very well. They bound her wrists with energy cuffs and led her out. The uprising. The Senate hall was in chaos. For centuries, the Scifi had followed their leaders without question. But now, the people knew the truth. Protests filled the streets. Holograms of Shkira's broadcast played on every screen. Citizens shouted, demanding answers. The The Senate had tried to shut down the transmission, but it was too late. The rebellion had begun. Shira, you have disrupted the foundation of our society. Skira lifted her chin. Then perhaps our foundation was never as strong as we believed. Voral's lips curled into the slightest smile. Indeed. As Skira left the Senate hall, she knew the battle was far from over. There would be resistance. There would be those who refused to accept the truth. But she had planted the seed of change. And soon, it would grow. Skira walked out of the Senate hall, her heart pounding. The moment had passed, and now the future of her people rested in the hands of politicians. Some had looked at her with curiosity, others with anger, but none had given her an immediate answer. She had expected this. Change was never easy. As she moved through the great crystal corridors of the capital, she could feel the weight of unseen eyes on her. Some Silari saw her as a savior, others as a traitor. Her communicator beeped. She glanced down. It was a message from Mathan. How did it go? She hesitated before responding. Uncertain. They are thinking. A moment later, his reply came. That's better than outright rejection. She sighed. Was it? As she reached her private residence, the door slid open, and she was met by a familiar face, Kale, her old mentor. Kale was one of the greatest Silari scientists, respected by the Senate and the people alike. His silver eyes, once filled with wisdom, now held a storm of emotions. Shira, he said, his voice quiet but firm. What have you done? She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. I have given our people hope. Kal's expression darkened. By using human science. She crossed her arms. Yes, and it worked. Kale let out a slow breath, shaking his head. You do not understand the danger you have created. She frowned. Danger? What danger is there in saving our species? Kale turned away, looking out of the window at the glowing city below. Do you truly believe the Senate will accept this? She stiffened. If they value survival, they must. Kale laughed bitterly. You are a scientist, Shira, but you are still young. You believe logic controls the world. It does not. Pride, power, and fear control the world. Skira felt a chill run through her. You are saying they will refuse, even if it means extinction. Kale turned to face her. I am saying some of them will refuse because it means extinction. She stared at him, confused. That makes no sense. Kal's gaze was heavy. There are those who believe the Xelari should not be saved in this way. That if we are doomed, then it is the will of the universe. Skira's stomach twisted. That is madness. Kale sighed. Madness or not, they have power. And you have made powerful enemies today. Skira's fingers tightened into fists. Then I will fight them. Kale gave her a sad smile. I knew you would say that. But be careful, Shira. There are those who would rather see you silenced than see our people change. Shira met his gaze with steady determination. Let them try. That night, she barely slept. Thoughts of resistance, betrayal, and the future swirled in her mind. When morning came, she received an unexpected message. A summons. The Senate had reached a decision. She wasted no time. Dressing in formal robes, she made her way back to the grand chamber, her heart pounding with every step. As she entered, she could feel the weight of every gaze upon her. Chancellor Voral stood at the center. His expression was unreadable. Shira, he began, after much discussion, the Senate has come to a decision regarding your discovery. The chamber fell silent. Skira lifted her chin, and Voral's silver eyes gleamed. Your research will be destroyed. Silence. Then a soft murmur. Shira's mind went blank for a moment, but then rage filled her. You cannot do this. Voral remained calm. We can, and we have. Shira's hands trembled, but she clenched them into fists. You would rather let our people die than accept the help of humans. A senator stood. We would rather maintain our purity than corrupt ourselves with alien influence. Shkira's breath caught. Purity. That was what this was truly about. Not survival, not science, but arrogance. We do not need humans to fix us, another senator declared. We are the HFY. We will find our own solution. Shkira's voice was cold. There is no other solution. If you destroy this research, you are destroying our species. Vorel's gaze did not waver. This meeting is over. Shkira felt her body shaking, but she forced herself to stand tall. Then you leave me no choice, she said. Vorel narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? She turned sharply. You will not destroy this research. A chuckle came from one of the senators. And how do you plan to stop us? Shkira paused at the entrance, her voice steady. Because I have already sent copies to trusted allies. If you silence me, others will rise. The truth cannot be erased. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Vorel's expression darkened. You are playing a dangerous game, Shkira. She met his gaze without fear. So are you. And with that, she walked away, leaving behind a room full of stunned leaders. As soon as she was outside, she tapped her communicator. Nathan. His voice crackled through. Yeah. They rejected it, she said. They want to destroy everything. A pause. Then Nathan's voice came, full of quiet determination. Then we don't let them. Shkira's lips curled into a small, fierce smile. Exactly. The fight was not over. It was just beginning. Shkira moved quickly through the quiet corridors of the capital, her heart pounding. The Senate's rejection had not broken her spirit. It had ignited something within her. They wanted to erase the truth, to bury the future of their species beneath their pride. She would not let them. She pressed her communicator. Nathan, are you secure? His voice crackled through. Yeah, I'm in my lab. What's happening? The Senate has decided to destroy all research. Silence. Then Nathan's voice turned sharp. That's bad. Really bad. Shkira exhaled. They are afraid. If they admit that humans have saved us, they will lose their power. Nathan sighed. Typical politics. So what now? She reached a hidden door in the lower levels of the Capitol and placed her hand against the scanner. The panel flashed green, and the door slid open. We fight back. The secret chamber was small but filled with technology. Screens lined the walls, showing data feeds, intercepted messages, and encrypted files. Inside, 4 other auxiliary were waiting. These were not politicians or generals. They were scientists, researchers, believers. One of them, a young auxiliary male named Relic, stood up. Shkira, what happened? She met his gaze. The Senate rejected the research. They planned to erase it. Gasps filled the room. They would let us die. Relic asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Shkira nodded. Yes, because they fear change. Another scientist, Talus, clenched his fists. Then we cannot let them win. Shkira turned to the screens. We still have the data, but we need a way to spread it before they destroy everything. Nathan's voice crackled through the speakers. I might have an idea. Shkira looked up. Tell me. Nathan chuckled. Well, since you auxiliary are so advanced, I'm assuming you have something like a planetary broadcast system. Relic's eyes widened. You want to broadcast the research to the entire planet. Nathan's voice was calm. Exactly. If the people know the truth, the Senate won't be able to hide it. Shkira's mind raced. It was dangerous. If they failed, they would be arrested, or worse. But if they succeeded, they would change history. She met the eyes of the others. This is our only chance. Are you with me? One by one, they nodded. The rebellion had begun. Meanwhile, in the Senate hall, Chancellor Vorel sat in his private chamber, deep in thought. The vote had been unanimous. The research would be erased, and Shkira's project would be forgotten. So why did he feel uneasy? A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Enter. But then, something did happen. Shkira's body temperature shifted slightly. Her biological readings showed minor but clear changes, as if something deep within her was activating after being dormant for years. Nathan stared at the screen in shock. It's working. Shkira's breath caught. You are certain? Nathan turned the monitor toward her. Your reproductive system is showing signs of activity. Your hormone levels, ones that should have been inactive, are increasing. For the first time in her life, Shkira felt something she never thought she would. Hope. The next morning, she awoke feeling different. A warmth spread through her body, a sensation she could not explain. For centuries, Scifi had been taught that their bodies were already perfect, unchangeable. But now, she could feel change happening inside her. Nathan ran more tests, and his excitement grew. Shkira, your body is responding even better than expected. It's not just small changes. It's a full biological restart. She pressed a hand to her stomach. Then, I can conceive. Nathan hesitated. We won't know for sure until we confirm it, but all the signs point to yes. Shkira closed her eyes. She had spent her life fighting against failure, watching her people lose hope, and accepting that she would never have a child. But now, for the first time, the future looked different. I need to tell the Senate, she said. Nathan's expression darkened. Are you sure that's a good idea? She frowned. This is what they wanted, isn't it? Nathan leaned against the table. Maybe. But governments don't always like solutions they didn't approve. Shkira's confidence wavered. He was right. The Exilary Senate had abandoned this research. They had declared the infertility problem unsolvable. If she returned with proof that a human had solved it, how would they react? She had broken the rules. She had used human science in a way that went against everything the Xilari believed. What if they saw her as a threat instead of a savior? That night, Shkira sat alone in her quarters, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She touched her stomach, imagining what it would be like to carry a child, to feel life growing inside her. She had spent so long feeling empty. Now, she felt alive. But fear lingered in her mind. Would her people accept this discovery? Or would they reject her for it? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Nathan stood there, holding a tablet. I've been running more calculations, he said. Your genetic markers are stabilizing. If you attempt conception, it might actually work. Shkira felt her chest tighten. If this succeeds, she whispered, I will become the first natural mother of the Exilari in centuries. Nathan gave her a small, reassuring smile. Yeah, and that means you're about to change everything. Shkira took a deep breath. She was ready. Even if the Senate refused to accept it, even if her people turned against her, she would not stop. Because hope had returned to the Xilari. And no law, no government, no ancient tradition would take it away again. Shkira stood at the edge of the observation deck, staring at the swirling blue nebula beyond the station's protective glass. Her heart was heavy, but her mind was clear. She had spent the last few days undergoing tests, and the results were undeniable. Her body was changing. For the first time in centuries, a Xilari woman had the chance to conceive naturally. She should have been overjoyed. But instead, she felt a deep sense of uncertainty. Nathan had warned her that revealing this discovery would not be simple. The Exilari Senate had already declared the infertility crisis unsolvable. If they learned that a human had succeeded where their greatest scientists had failed, would they see it as a miracle or as a threat? A soft chime echoed through the room, signaling that someone was at the door. Nathan's voice followed. Shkira, you there? She took a deep breath. Enter. The door slid open, and Nathan stepped inside, holding a data tablet. His expression was serious, but there was a flicker of excitement in his eyes. I have the final analysis, he said. Your hormone levels have stabilized, and your reproductive system is fully functional. I developed faster than light travel. What could they possibly offer the galaxy? But then, something caught her attention. The news continued. Humans have demonstrated remarkable biological adaptability. Unlike most species, they possess highly flexible genetics, allowing them to reproduce even in extreme conditions. Scientists have noted that human reproductive systems display unique regenerative properties. Shira's eyes widened. Her mind raced through the implications. A species with genetic adaptability. One that could survive in different environments, with DNA that could repair itself and adjust to change. She rushed back to her lab, her exhaustion forgotten. If human biology was truly as unique as the reports claimed, then perhaps there was still hope. With renewed determination, she opened a new research file and typed a single name at the top. Dr. Nathan Cole, human biologist. The fate of the HFY might not be sealed after all, and it would all begin with a human. Shira barely slept that night. The moment she read about human adaptability, something inside her sparked hope. It was a feeling she had buried long ago. But now, the idea refused to leave her mind. She spent hours researching humans, digging into every report she could find. The more she read, the more fascinated she became. Unlike the Xilari, whose genetics had been altered for generations to be perfect, humans were flawed, but in a way that made them stronger. Their bodies adjusted to different environments. They could heal rapidly, resist diseases, and most importantly, their reproductive systems remained active even in harsh conditions. Shira's hands trembled as she opened a new research file. If she could find a way to apply human biological traits to the Xilari, maybe, just maybe, she could restore fertility to her people. But there was a problem. She wasn't a human expert. She needed someone who understood human biology better than any Xilari scientist. Someone who could look at this problem from a completely different perspective. And there was only one name that stood out in her research. Dr. Nathan Cole. Dr. Nathan Cole was a human biologist working at the Galactic Science Exchange on the planet Veneris 9. Unlike most of his colleagues, who focused on space exploration and engineering, he specialized in genetics and reproductive sciences. Some even called him a genius. Others thought he was a bit reckless. Shira didn't care about his personality. She needed his knowledge. It took her only a few hours to arrange a meeting. The Galactic Science Exchange had open communication channels, and humans, being new to interstellar society, were eager to collaborate. Nathan responded quickly, curious about her request. 2 days later, she arrived at Veneris 9. The human research station was simplistic compared to Xilari architecture. It lacked the elegance of her homeworld, but it was functional, efficient, human. She found Nathan in a small lab, his workstation cluttered with samples, holograms, and half-eaten food containers. He was younger than she expected, with dark brown hair that looked like he had barely run his fingers through it to straighten it. His coat was wrinkled, and his boots were untied. He looked up, grinning. "Ah, you must be Shira. You're earlier than I expected." She frowned. "Punctuality is important." Nathan shrugged. "I suppose it is." He gestured toward a chair. "Sit. Let's talk." Shira hesitated but finally sat across from him. She had studied humans, but meeting one in person was different. He was far more relaxed than any Xilari scientist she had ever met. "So," Nathan said, leaning forward, "you said you needed my help with something important. What's going on?" Shira took a deep breath. "The Xilari species is dying. Our fertility rates have fallen to nearly zero, and despite our best efforts, we have not found a solution." Nathan's smile faded. "That's serious." She nodded. "I believe human biology may hold the key to reversing our condition." Begun. Shira sat in the dim glow of her laboratory, staring at the data on her screen. The numbers had not changed. The results were the same as before. Another failure. Her hands trembled as she placed them on the table. She had spent years searching for a cure, hoping to find a way to reverse the infertility crisis that was slowly destroying her species. But every experiment, every test, every calculation led to the same painful conclusion. There was no solution. The Xylari were once one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their technology surpassed most civilizations, and their knowledge of genetics was unmatched. But their progress had come at a cost. Over centuries, they had perfected their own DNA, eliminating weaknesses and diseases. They had become a species of perfect beings. And now, they were dying. Fewer and fewer children were born every cycle. The Xylari Senate had formed special research teams, funding scientists like Shkira to find a way to restore fertility. But years passed, and nothing worked. Shkira had once dreamed of having a child. She had imagined what it would be like to feel life growing inside her, to hold her offspring in her arms. But that dream had faded long ago. Now she only focused on her work, hoping that if she could not have a child, at least she could help others. A soft beep interrupted her thoughts. The screen flashed with an incoming message from the Xylari High Council. She straightened her back and tapped the screen. A holographic figure appeared, Counselor Drinak, one of the leaders of the scientific division. His face was stern, as always. "Shkira," he said, his voice calm but cold. "Your latest report confirms what we feared." She nodded. There has been no success. The genetic structure of our people has reached a point where it no longer responds to any known treatments. Drinak exhaled slowly. Then we must accept the inevitable. Shkira's throat tightened. "You mean giving up?" "There is no other option," he said. "We have tried everything. If no solution exists, then perhaps this is simply our fate." Fate. The word filled Shkira with quiet rage. She refused to believe that their extinction was fate. There had to be a way. But before she could protest, Drinak continued. "The Senate has decided to end the research programs." Shkira's heart pounded. "You can't be serious." "We are diverting our resources to other matters. There are more pressing concerns than chasing a lost cause." Shkira clenched her fists. She wanted to argue, to demand more time. But she could see it in Drenak's eyes. His decision was final. The transmission ended, leaving Shkira in silence. She turned back to her research, staring at the meaningless numbers. Was this truly the end? Would the Xylari vanish from the universe, not because of war or disease, but because they had made themselves too perfect to survive? She refused to accept it. For hours, she continued working, analyzing every possibility, searching for something she had missed. But exhaustion overtook her. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. When she awoke, the lab's artificial lights had dimmed, signaling the late hour. Her eyes were dry, her mind heavy with failure. She needed air. Leaving the lab, she walked through the grand halls of the Xylari Science Complex. The place felt emptier than before. Once, there had been hundreds of researchers working day and night to solve the crisis. Now, most had left, accepting their fate. She stepped outside onto a floating platform that overlooked the city of Xylaris Prime. Towering spires of silver and glass stretched toward the sky, shimmering under the glow of the twin moons. The city was still beautiful, still strong, but without children, without new life, it was a dying world. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden announcement from the central news system. A voice echoed across the city. "Attention, citizens. A new species has been officially recognized by the Galactic Council. The humans of Sol 3, known as Earth, have entered the interstellar community." Shkira barely reacted. Humans. She had heard of them before. A primitive species that had only recently. There's no doubt now. It worked. Shkira's fingers curled against the cool metal railing. "Then it is time." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Time for what?" "I must return home and present this to the Senate." Nathan hesitated. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Shkira turned to face him. "You do not understand my people, Nathan. The Senate believes in logic and control. If I keep this secret, and they discover it later, they will see me as a traitor. But if I bring them the truth myself, perhaps they will listen. Nathan sighed. And if they don't? Shkira's expression hardened. Then I will make them listen. Nathan studied her for a long moment, then smiled slightly. I was starting to think you were all cold and logical. Guess I was wrong. Shkira tilted her head. You still have much to learn about the Xilari. Nathan chuckled. Guess so. He handed her the data tablet. I've compiled everything. The genetic scans, the medical reports, and my personal research notes. If you're doing this, you'll need evidence. Shkira took the tablet, feeling its weight in her hands. It was more than just data. It was proof that her people had a future again. She looked at Nathan. Thank you. He shrugged. Hey, if this works, you'll be making history. Just don't forget to mention the brilliant human who helped you. Shkira gave him a rare smile. I will not forget. 3 days later, Shkira arrived on Xilarian, the homeworld of her people. The capital city was a masterpiece of white stone and shimmering crystal towers, built with the perfection that Xilari culture demanded. But beneath its beauty, there was a silent sadness. The streets were quiet. The great plazas, once filled with children's laughter, were now nearly empty. Her people were fading. She made her way to the Senate Hall, where the ruling council of the Xilari gathered. The guards let her pass without question. She was still a respected scientist after all, but she knew that what she was about to do could change everything. As she stepped into the great chamber, dozens of Xilari leaders turned their attention toward her. At the center sat High Chancellor Vorel, his silver eyes sharp with wisdom and authority. Shkira, he said, his voice calm. We did not expect you. What brings you before the Senate? Shkira stepped forward, her grip tightening around the data tablet. I bring news of great importance. I have found a way to restore fertility to our people. A murmur spread through the chamber. The senators exchanged skeptical glances. Chancellor Vorel studied her carefully. You claim to have done what our finest scientists could not. Shkira stood tall. Yes, and I have proof. She activated the tablet, projecting a series of holographic reports into the air. Data streams, genetic comparisons, and medical records floated before the Senate, displaying the undeniable truth. Her body had responded to the treatment. For the first time in centuries, a Xilari could bear a child. Gasps echoed through the room. Some senators leaned forward in fascination. Others whispered in concern. Chancellor Vorel's eyes narrowed. And how was this achieved? Shkira hesitated, but she knew there was no point in hiding it. With the help of a human scientist. The room fell silent. Vorel's expression darkened. A human. Yes, Shkira said. Their biology is adaptable. It provided the key we had overlooked. By studying their natural resilience, we discovered a way to reawaken our own reproductive functions. A senator stood abruptly. You experimented on yourself with alien science. Yes, Shkira said without shame. And it worked. More whispers. Some voices rose in anger, others in astonishment. Vorel leaned forward. And what do you propose we do with this knowledge? Shkira took a deep breath. We must act. If we do nothing, our people will die. This research must be shared. Others must be treated. We can save our species. A heavy silence followed. Finally, a senator spoke. If what you say is true, this changes everything. Another senator, an elder Xilari, frowned. But can we accept this? If we use human knowledge to restore our fertility, what does that mean for our identity? Have we not always strived for perfection? Are we to admit that humans, an inferior species, have saved us? Shkira's eyes burned with determination. Humans are not inferior. They are different. And difference is not weakness. It is strength. Vorel studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. This matter will require discussion. But no, he raised an eyebrow. Human biology. Your species adapts, she explained. Your reproductive system remains active under various conditions. Your genetic structure is far more flexible than ours. If we could study it, perhaps we could develop a way to restart fertility in Scifi bodies. Nathan scratched his chin. You want to use human DNA to fix Scifi infertility? Not in a direct way, she clarified. I don't mean to mix our genetics. I mean to find a way to trigger adaptation in Scifi biology, just as humans naturally do. Nathan leaned back, thinking. That's really interesting. His eyes lit up with curiosity. Your people engineered themselves into infertility by eliminating imperfections, right? Yes. And you think the key to fixing it is introducing imperfection back into your DNA? Scifi hesitated. I suppose that is one way to put it. Nathan chuckled. You don't like the sound of that, do you? The Scifi have spent centuries striving for perfection, she admitted. The idea that imperfection is necessary, it is difficult to accept. Nathan shrugged. Well, nature isn't perfect. It's messy. That's what makes life work. Scifi felt a strange mix of frustration and admiration. Humans were unpredictable, but there was wisdom in their simplicity. So, Nathan said, tapping his desk, if we do this, we'll need to conduct some very careful experiments. We'd have to find a way to introduce human biological signals to Scifi without changing your fundamental structure. Scifi nodded. I understand, and I am willing to volunteer. Nathan's eyes widened. Wait, what? I will be the test subject, she said firmly. I am already infertile. If something goes wrong, it affects no one but me. Nathan frowned. That's a huge risk. You realize that, right? I do. He studied her for a moment. Then he sighed. All right. But we do this carefully. No reckless shortcuts. Scifi gave a rare smile. Agreed. As she left the lab that night, she felt something she had not felt in years. Determination. For the first time since the crisis began, there was hope. And it all started with a human. Scifi sat on the examination table, her heart pounding. The sterile scent of the human lab filled the air as she watched Dr. Nathan Cole prepare the equipment. He moved with a mixture of excitement and caution, scanning through genetic data on his holographic screen. This is the last chance to back out, Nathan said without looking up. Once we begin, there's no guarantee what will happen. I am ready, Scifi replied firmly. Nathan sighed. All right, let's do this. For the past few days, they had worked together, analyzing human and Scifi biology. The results were fascinating and troubling. Scifi bodies had become so rigidly perfect that they could no longer change, no longer evolve. That was why their species was dying. Their reproductive systems had simply stopped responding to natural processes. But human DNA was different. It was chaotic, adaptable, always adjusting to new challenges. Nathan's idea was not to change Scifi DNA directly, but to use human biochemical markers to wake up Scifi's reproductive system, tricking her body into remembering how to function. It was a risky experiment, but she had nothing left to lose. Nathan pressed a few buttons, and a robotic arm lowered a small device toward Scifi's arm. Inside was a carefully designed genetic activator, a combination of Scifi and human molecular signals. It wasn't a permanent change, just a catalyst. This should feel like nothing more than a mild shock, Nathan said. But if it works, your body should start responding within the next few hours. Scifi took a deep breath. Do it. Nathan activated the injector. A soft hum filled the air, followed by a faint pulse of warmth spreading through Scifi's arm. She closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but something felt different. Nathan watched her closely. How do you feel? Scifi flexed her fingers. Strange. Like there is energy inside me. Nathan nodded. That's a good sign. Now, we wait. The first few hours passed without any major changes. Skira remained under observation, undergoing multiple scans while Nathan monitored her vitals. He was cautious, ensuring nothing unexpected happened.